The great hall of Andara Prime buzzed with alien life and otherworldly color. Marcus couldn't believe he was here, a mere assistant consulate representative from Earth, stumbling through the shimmering corridors of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. Towering, silver-limbed creatures floated past him, conversing in melodic tones, while armored beings with crystalline skin and flickering lights within their bodies glided through the hall like they were born from the very stars. Every sound, every glint of light, and every swirling color felt like a language he didn't speak, a rhythm he could only try to follow. He adjusted his stiff formal jacket, already feeling like an intruder. Why had they sent him to an event that felt like a cosmic ballet? The ambassador had fallen ill at the last moment, and he'd been thrown in without so much as a briefing on the customs. Now he stood, desperately trying to recall what little he'd gleaned about Andoran etiquette, hoping to make it through this event without causing a galactic incident. A cool, lilac-skinned attendant approached, tilting her head at Marcus. "You are Marcus Hayes of Terra, yes?" Her voice was like a soft chime. He nodded, managing a strained smile. "Yes, Earth. That's me." "Good." She beckoned him forward with a graceful wave. "The royal greeting will begin shortly. Princess Lyra will meet you in the inner chamber. Please follow me." He felt his heart quicken. Princess Lyra, an intergalactic legend, as mysterious as she was influential. She was known for her wisdom and beauty, but also for her unpredictability. Some claimed her eyes could see into your mind, reading secrets hidden even from yourself. Her presence was rumored to be overwhelming, even intimidating. As they reached the inner chamber, the attendant gestured for him to pause. "When you meet her, bow and place your hand across your chest. It is a gesture of respect on Andara. Be mindful not to look directly into her eyes for too long. It can be overwhelming for outsiders." Marcus's nerves tangled tighter. "Right. Bow, hand on chest, and no staring." He offered a grateful, if shaky, smile. "Thank you." The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Marcus stepped into the chamber. The atmosphere changed immediately. Quieter, the sounds of the hall muted to a low hum, as though he'd walked into the center of a still, deep ocean. And there she was. Princess Lyra stood on a raised dais, dressed in shimmering robes that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Her hair, a deep shade of silver with strands of glistening blue, cascaded down her back like a waterfall of stars. Her skin was a delicate shade of sapphire, and her eyes, dark, endless, touched with a faint glow, captured him instantly, a gravitational pull he couldn't resist. It was as if the very air around her hummed with energy, charged and alive. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He drew in a breath and forced himself to remember the gesture he'd been taught. Bow, hand over chest, simple, respectful. He stepped forward, lowering his gaze just enough, and leaned in for what he thought was a courteous bow. But his foot caught on the corner of the ornate rug beneath him, and before he could stop himself, he stumbled forward. His face brushed close to her cheek, and in a clumsy attempt to balance himself, his lips landed in the faintest touch against her skin. He froze, horrified, pulling back in an instant. A small, startled gasp escaped her, and she stared at him with wide eyes, her hand instinctively touching her cheek where his lips had grazed. The silence was deafening. "Your Highness, I am so terribly sorry." He raised his hand, stepping back, cheeks flaming. "That was an accident. I meant no—" But her gaze had shifted, an unreadable expression passing over her face. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing, studying him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being peeled apart, layer by layer. She didn't look angry or offended. She looked intrigued. "You are different," she murmured, her voice like a low, resonant melody. Her lips curved ever so slightly, a faint smile that hinted at some private amusement or realization. I'm really sorry, Princess," Marcus stammered, feeling the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on him. He could practically feel the tension around him, the strange, subtle glances from her attendants, the curious whispers they exchanged. "You do not need to apologize," she said softly, her gaze still fixed on him. "You have, perhaps unknowingly, offered a gesture far more meaningful than a mere bow." She stepped closer, her eyes softening, and Marcus felt as if he were rooted to the spot. One of her attendants cleared his throat, drawing her attention, but she held up a graceful hand, silencing him. "It seems," she continued, her gaze never wavering from Marcus, "that you and I are now bound in a way. On Andara, such a touch is reserved for those who share a connection." Marcus's throat went dry. He struggled to form a coherent sentence. "A connection? Wait, I don't think—" "You Earthlings may not realize this," she said almost playfully, "but such gestures do not go unnoticed in our society. They carry meaning, deep meaning." The attendant who'd escorted him stepped forward, her face unreadable, and addressed the princess. "Your Highness, should we proceed with the formal declaration?" "Declaration?" Marcus's voice cracked. He turned back to Lyra, who seemed almost amused by his confusion. She nodded, her gaze warm yet probing. "You may not have intended this, Marcus of Terra, but in the eyes of Andara, you have claimed a part of my spirit." A rush of murmurs filled the chamber as the full implication of her words sank in. "But I didn't mean—" He looked around desperately, feeling the weight of 100 alien eyes on him, none more intense than the princess's own. Lyra took a small step closer, close enough that he could see the faint, opalescent glimmer of her skin, the fine details of her intricate jewelry. "You are, perhaps, unfamiliar with Andaran customs," she continued, voice gentle yet teasing. "But you have awakened something within our laws, a ritual not easily broken. To the people of Andara, you have, in effect, declared yourself bound to me." The murmuring grew louder, attendants and nobles exchanging glances filled with shock and intrigue. Marcus swallowed, feeling like the air had been stolen from his lungs. His mind raced for a way out, some clever explanation, anything to undo what he'd inadvertently set into motion. "Your Highness, if there's any way to—" "There is no reversal, Marcus." She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. "You've entered our customs now. Whether intentionally or not, you are part of this world. My world." The weight of her words settled over him like a mantle he hadn't asked for, yet couldn't cast off. He felt the stir of something powerful, something deep-rooted and ancient. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a binding that stretched beyond words, beyond cultures. And judging by the look in her eyes, the princess had no intention of letting him go. The weight of Princess Lyra's hand on Marcus's shoulder felt like a brand, a mark he hadn't earned and didn't want. The whispers of the assembled crowd seemed to grow louder, surrounding him like an invisible net, binding him to her world in ways he could barely comprehend. Her gaze remained fixed on him, intense and unyielding, as though she was peeling back his every layer, searching for whatever spark had compelled him to make that fateful, accidental kiss. Marcus swallowed, feeling a mixture of dread and confusion bubbling up in his chest. He opened his mouth, trying to think of something, anything, that might untangle this mess, but the words wouldn't come. Around him, Andaran nobles exchanged glances of shock and intrigue, their expressions a blend of fascination and envy. His mind was spinning, grasping for a way to escape the web he'd just stumbled into. I really didn't mean," he stammered, feeling his cheeks flush under the intense gaze of the princess and her people. "Princess Lyra, please, I didn't know. It was an accident. I'm not trying to—" "A bond is not something that needs to be intended, Marcus," Lyra interrupted softly, her voice a calm ripple against the growing storm of whispers. "It simply is." She held his gaze, her eyes reflecting the glow of the chamber's ethereal lights. It was as if she were challenging him to understand something beyond his limited grasp of her world, of her people. He shifted uncomfortably, feeling the overwhelming urge to break eye contact, but the pull of her presence kept him frozen in place. An elder Andaran stepped forward from the crowd, his robes shimmering with hues that shifted as he moved, like the light glinting off a distant nebula. His features were stern, marked by the weight of wisdom and years. He inclined his head toward Lyra, his gaze flicking to Marcus only briefly, as though he were studying a curious specimen. "Your Highness?" the elder intoned, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to reverberate through the chamber. "This Terran man has touched upon one of our most sacred customs. Do you wish to proceed with the binding ceremony?" "The binding ceremony?" Marcus echoed, the words foreign and ominous on his tongue. Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile, her eyes never leaving his. "The binding ritual is a rare and honored tradition among my people. To touch another as you did is a declaration of something deeper, and we do not take such declarations lightly." She paused, letting her gaze drift over him, her voice lowering to a near whisper, meant only for him. "Are you afraid, Marcus?" He swallowed hard, his throat tight. "Afraid? I'm not exactly sure what's happening, Princess. Where I come from, a kiss, even an accidental one, doesn't carry this kind of weight. I don't know your ways, your traditions." His eyes searched hers, half pleading, half defiant. "This isn't my world. I don't know how to do this." For a moment, her expression softened, something almost like sympathy flickering across her features. But it was quickly replaced by a look of resolve, a steeliness that told him this wasn't something she was willing to release him from. "Then perhaps," she said, "you will simply have to learn." Before he could respond, the elder cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "If the princess wishes to proceed, the Terran shall be bound by Andaran law to fulfill his role." He looked at Marcus, his eyes stern. "Do you understand the significance of this, Earthling?" Marcus felt like he was being dragged along a swiftly moving river, pulled under by forces he couldn't control. He shook his head, barely managing to keep his voice steady. No, I don't understand. I never meant for this. I don't even know what this bond means." The elder studied him for a long, tense moment, then inclined his head, as if conceding to Marcus's ignorance. "It means that your life is now entwined with that of the princess. You are bound to protect her, to accompany her, to fulfill whatever role she requires." His gaze darkened. To break the bond would be unthinkable, a dishonor that would mark both you and the princess. Marcus felt the room spin around him. "So you're saying I don't have a choice?" Princess Lyra took a step closer, her eyes softened by a strange intensity, an interest that was both mysterious and disarming. "It was your choice, Marcus. Perhaps you did not know the weight of it when you made it, but it was still yours." "But, Princess," he struggled, "where I come from, people don't get bound by a single touch. We need more than that to form relationships, to make commitments." Lyra tilted her head, regarding him with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. "Perhaps in your world, but here, a touch holds weight, significance. A touch is a promise, even if it was unintended." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, exhaling in frustration. "Look, I don't know how to be whatever this is supposed to make me. I'm not some warrior or guardian. I'm just a guy from Earth." The princess's gaze softened further, and for a brief fleeting moment he saw a vulnerability in her eyes that made his heart skip. She reached out, her hand hovering near his, hesitant, as if testing the limits of this accidental connection between them. "Perhaps that's exactly what I need," she murmured, so softly he almost didn't hear. The elder shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Your Highness, we must not delay the ritual if the bond is to hold. There are forces who would seek to break it, who would exploit the vulnerability of an unsealed bond." Marcus's mind raced, questions piling up faster than he could think them through. "Wait, forces? You mean people might attack us?" Lyra's face grew serious, her gaze hardening as she turned to the elder. The Earthling must know what he's stepping into, Elder. This is no simple ceremony. If we are bound, there will be consequences. The Elder nodded solemnly, then turned his piercing gaze on Marcus. The princess is not without enemies, Earthling. Should you proceed, you would be pledging to stand by her side through any trials, any conflicts, to protect her as fiercely as she would protect you. Marcus opened his mouth, only to close it again, his mind reeling. He'd come to this world as a simple envoy, a minor representative of Earth, just here to nod politely and not get in anyone's way. He'd never imagined he'd be thrust into a commitment he barely understood, one that carried risks he couldn't even begin to measure. Lyra took a step closer, her expression a strange blend of determination and something softer, something that pulled at him in ways he couldn't explain. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, "I won't force you. But if you choose this, you'll have my loyalty, and I will guard your life as I would my own." He looked into her eyes, searching for a trace of insincerity, but found only a steady, quiet resolve. The weight of her words settled over him, mingling with his own bewildered thoughts, stirring something within him he hadn't expected. "So if I say yes," he began slowly, "what happens next?" The Elder raised a hand, his voice solemn. "The binding will take place under the glow of Andara's twin moons. There, in the ancient grove of our ancestors, you will exchange oaths and seal your bond, and from that moment onward, you will be bound." The finality in the Elder's words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He cast one last look at the princess, at the faint, almost hopeful smile on her lips, the slight arch of her brow that seemed to challenge him, dare him to step into her world. He took a deep breath, feeling the enormity of the decision pressing down on him. This wasn't what he'd planned. None of this was what he'd planned. And yet, standing here, caught in the unwavering gaze of the alien princess, he felt the strange tug of fate, the thrill of stepping into the unknown. "All right," he said, his voice steady. I'll go through with it." The Elder inclined his head, approving, while Lyra's expression softened, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. "Then prepare yourself, Marcus of Terra," the Elder said, his voice low and foreboding. "For when the moons rise, your fate will be sealed." The twin moons cast their ghostly glow over the grove, bathing everything in a pale, otherworldly light. Marcus stood among ancient Andaran trees that twisted toward the heavens like silent guardians. Their dark branches stretched and twisted, encircling him and Lyra, as if the trees themselves were intent on bearing witness to the ritual. A sense of quiet power filled the air, and Marcus felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes, those of Lyra's ancestors, watching him, testing him, questioning his worthiness. Lyra stood opposite him, dressed in shimmering Andaran ceremonial robes that seemed to shift with every movement, catching the moonlight in hues that danced like liquid silver. Her eyes never left his, her face solemn yet softened by an unreadable emotion, a flicker of vulnerability hidden beneath her usual grace. He could hardly believe how far he'd come since that accidental kiss. It seemed impossible, as if someone else's life had tangled itself with his own, weaving him into a story he'd never intended to be a part of. But here he was, heart racing, feeling that strange pull, that ancient and powerful binding that had begun long before he'd ever laid eyes on Princess Lyra. An Elder, robed in cloth adorned with symbols he could not recognize, stepped forward, holding a staff that glowed faintly under the moonlight. He spoke in the Andaran language, his voice resonant, filling the grove like a chant of ancient power. The words were unfamiliar, but Marcus felt them pulse through him, as if the very earth under his feet were echoing them. Lyra responded, her voice steady and melodic, speaking words he couldn't understand yet felt deeply, as if they were seeping into his bones. The Elder turned to Marcus, nodding for him to speak, his eyes expectant. Marcus swallowed, feeling the weight of his own inadequacy. He didn't know the words, didn't know the ritual. He was an outsider here, trying to fit into a world that had bound him in ways he hadn't chosen. Lyra, he began, faltering slightly. I don't have the right words for this. He glanced around, feeling the eyes of the Andaran nobility upon him, judgment hanging in the air like a heavy fog. But I think this is about more than words, isn't it? The elder's stern expression softened, almost as though he were surprised, and Lyra gave him the faintest nod, a glint of approval in her eyes. Yes, Marcus, she replied, her voice gentle, encouraging. It's about intention, about spirit. Speak what you feel. Marcus took a deep breath, the words coming to him unbidden, surprising even himself. Lyra, when I first met you, I was just a stranger here. I didn't understand your people, your ways. I didn't think I'd ever belong in a world so far from my own. He glanced down, a half-smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. And truthfully, I still don't think I understand most of this. But I've come to realize something about bonds. He looked up, meeting her eyes, his voice steadying. I didn't choose this bond, but I don't regret it either. You've shown me strength I didn't know I had, pulled me into something that's bigger than just you and me. And if you'll have me, if you'll let me stay by your side, then I'll honor this bond, whatever it means, however long it lasts. A murmur rippled through the assembled Andarans, surprise and approval mixing in their expressions. Lyra's face softened, and for the first time Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his heart skip, a flicker of trust, of acceptance. The elder raised his staff, his voice rising into a crescendo. Then by the light of the moons, let this bond be sealed. The grove seemed to pulse with energy, the ancient trees creaking as if in response to some unseen force. Lyra extended her hand toward Marcus, her expression intent. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed hers, and then something unexpected happened. The moment their hands met, a surge of energy jolted through him, as if lightning had struck the very ground beneath them. His vision blurred, the world around him spinning, and in that instant, he felt himself being pulled almost violently into Lyra's mind, her memories, her emotions, her thoughts. Images flickered before his eyes. Lyra as a young girl, standing in the same grove, her eyes wide with wonder as she listened to the stories of her ancestors. He saw her training, learning the ways of her people, the weight of duty resting on her shoulders. He saw flashes of her life, her triumphs and losses, her moments of doubt, and her quiet moments of vulnerability, hidden from all but himself. And then he saw something more, something that made his heart pound in his chest. Visions of a future that might be, of battles and alliances, of worlds colliding and fates intertwining. And at the heart of it all, he saw himself and Lyra, standing side by side, facing the unknown together. He gasped, pulling back, his mind reeling from the intensity of the connection. Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with astonishment, as though she too had seen something unexpected, something profound. Marcus, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't expect. The elder stepped forward, his face grave, but his eyes held a glimmer of something that Marcus couldn't quite place. You have completed the bond, he announced, his voice carrying a strange finality. And now, you must know the truth. Marcus glanced at Lyra, confusion filling his gaze. The truth? What truth? The elder raised his staff, his voice somber. The bond you have forged is not just a ceremonial bond. It is a prophecy, a force that cannot be broken. It binds you to a future where you and the princess must stand together to prevent a great darkness. Lyra's face paled, her gaze locked with Marcus's. A great darkness? The elder nodded. Our ancestors foresaw a time when the galaxy would face a threat beyond any of our comprehension. They foresaw a bond that would bridge worlds, a connection that would bring together the strengths of two species. You, Marcus of Earth, are the one foretold. The bond you share with the princess is destined to protect not only Andara but the entire galaxy. Marcus felt his heart race, his mind struggling to comprehend the weight of the Elder's words. A prophecy? A threat to the galaxy? This was beyond anything he could have imagined. But why me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm just an ordinary person. The Elder's gaze softened, a faint smile touching his lips. Perhaps that is precisely why you were chosen. In your simplicity lies a strength that our people cannot see. You are the balance to our power, the anchor that will keep our princess grounded. Lyra reached out, her hand resting gently on his. Marcus, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her eyes. We were bound by accident, but perhaps there was a greater purpose all along. Perhaps we were meant to meet, to forge this bond. Marcus looked at her, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He squeezed her hand, nodding. Then, I'll stay by your side, Lyra. Whatever this prophecy means, whatever this darkness is, we'll face it together. A sudden rustle among the trees drew their attention. Figures emerged from the shadows, armored and armed, their faces obscured by dark helmets. The Andarans gasped, stepping back, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the insignia on their armor, an emblem of a faction known only in whispers, a faction that served no one but the highest bidder. Princess Lyra, one of them called, his voice cold and hollow. The bond has marked you, and now you belong to us. Marcus stepped in front of Lyra instinctively, his body tensing, his mind racing. The prophecy, the binding, the unknown forces that would come for her, all of it was real, unfolding right before his eyes. But as he met Lyra's gaze, he felt a surge of confidence, a quiet determination that filled him with strength. He knew in that moment that he would fight for her, that he would honor their bond, that he would protect her with everything he had. Looks like the prophecy didn't mention one thing, he muttered, his voice low and steady. Lyra tilted her head, her lips curving into a faint smile. And what's that? That I'm not going anywhere, he replied, a glint of resolve in his eyes. The figures advanced, and together, Marcus and Lyra stood ready, their bond forged in fate, prepared to face the unknown. The hum of the ship resonated like a living heartbeat, subtle but incessant, a strange otherworldly lull that threatened to lull Mira back into sleep. Her senses stirred, resisting. In the haze between wakefulness and sleep, she felt cold metal beneath her, pressing against her skin through the thin, unfamiliar material of her clothing. Slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes. At first, it was only light, stark, blinding white from above. She flinched, closing her eyes again, her thoughts sluggishly catching up with her surroundings. This wasn't her room, and that wasn't the glow of her bedside lamp. This light was sterile, harsh. The sound around her, too. Quiet murmurs, a distant clicking of strange devices, and footsteps that seemed to echo unnaturally. She was surrounded by walls of shimmering metal, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns and glowing symbols she didn't recognize. Mira Reynolds, age 23, Earth origin, identified as female. A soft, eerie voice droned, detached and clinical. Mira froze, barely daring to breathe. She opened her eyes a sliver, scanning her surroundings while lying motionless. The voice continued, and she realized it wasn't directed at her. It was reporting, as if delivering an inventory. A figure stood over her, tall and ethereal, with skin that gleamed silver and eyes that seemed too large for its slender face. Alien, unmistakably alien. And it was watching her, one eyebrow, or what Mira assumed to be an eyebrow, arched with the faintest expression of interest. She's awake, a second voice noted, sharper than the first, though equally devoid of warmth. The first alien tilted its head, its inky eyes narrowing as it studied her. I see, it murmured. Then, unexpectedly, it leaned in, a spark of curiosity lighting its gaze. Fascinating. These humans, so fragile in appearance, yet resilient. Mira swallowed, her throat dry. Stay calm. She forced her breathing to slow, letting her mind race behind the mask of calm she managed to adopt. She knew better than to ask the immediate question of why am I here. They'd either ignore her or mock her, and Mira needed every scrap of pride intact. Instead, she met the alien's gaze and arched an eyebrow. "Well," she said, her voice hoarse but steady, "if you're done taking notes, I'd like to know who you are." The first alien's lip quirked, just slightly. It seemed amused. "We are the Narelle. I am Dr. Aelrin, and this is Commander Viren." It gestured to the second alien, who stood back, arms folded, his eyes glinting with cold disinterest. Mira looked between them. "Narelle, huh?" she repeated, letting her gaze linger on Aelrin's face. "And you just kidnapped me? Is this how you welcome all your visitors?" Commander Viren's mouth twitched, displeasure evident. "Watch your tone, human," he said, voice low, like the quiet before a storm. "You are here because you were selected. You should feel honored." "Honored?" Mira laughed, the sound brittle in the metallic silence. She pushed herself up, wincing as the room swayed slightly, but keeping her tone steady. "You think I should feel honored for being abducted in the middle of the night, dragged across who knows how many galaxies and displayed like some lab rat?" Aelrin lifted a hand, signaling for silence. His gaze softened slightly. "There's no need for hostility, Mira," he said almost gently. "Your species has unique qualities. You should consider this an opportunity." "Opportunity?" Mira shot back, her eyes narrowing. "For what exactly? I don't remember signing up for any alien opportunity." Commander Viren's expression hardened. He stepped closer, towering over her, and she felt his presence like an electric charge in the air. "You may not realize it, but you are here as part of something much larger than yourself, human. If you cooperate, this could be mutually beneficial." Mira took a steadying breath, her mind racing. Beneath her growing frustration was a simmering curiosity. They'd selected her for a reason, but why? And what was this so-called opportunity they kept alluding to? "So," she said, letting a note of defiance slip into her tone, "am I supposed to just sit here quietly while you poke and prod me? Or do I at least get to know what kind of research you're doing?" Aelrin shared a look with Viren before answering. "Our race," he began, voice contemplative, "seeks to understand the resilience of human beings, your physiology, your behavior, your willpower. The human mind is complex, adaptable, in ways we do not fully comprehend. And I'm supposed to help you with that? By sitting in a cell and letting you take notes?" Mira scoffed, crossing her arms. She met Aelrin's gaze directly, refusing to be intimidated. "Your cooperation will make things easier," Viren said, his tone as icy as ever. "But do not mistake our politeness for leniency. We are quite capable of ensuring your compliance if necessary." Aelrin sighed, his expression almost regretful. "We would rather not resort to unpleasantness. This arrangement can be mutually enlightening if approached with a spirit of cooperation." Mira studied them, weighing her options. She had no illusions about her predicament. These beings, for all their polite language and distant curiosity, would do whatever they pleased if she pushed them too far. But she wasn't about to let them control every aspect of this situation. "Fine," she said after a pause, adopting a more measured tone. "I'll cooperate, for now. But I want answers. Real ones. Why me? Out of all the humans you could have chosen, why did you pick me?" Aelrin tilted his head, a glint of something unreadable in his gaze. "You were chosen because you are remarkable, Mira. You have a mind that we believe will prove enlightening." His words sent a shiver down her spine. There was something in his tone, some knowledge that lurked just beyond her reach. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or alarmed. "Remarkable," she echoed, her voice laden with skepticism. "Yes," he replied, voice low and insistent. "And soon, you will see the truth of that for yourself." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension. Mira sat back, crossing her arms, meeting his gaze without flinching. They might have her captive, but she wasn't about to make this easy for them. "Let's make one thing clear," she said, her voice quiet but laced with defiance. "I didn't ask to be here, and if you think I'm just going to roll over and play remarkable human specimen for your little experiment, you're dead wrong." Commander Viren's eyes narrowed, his mouth twisting in irritation, but Aelrin merely inclined his head as though acknowledging her challenge. "Understood," he said softly. "Your cooperation, then, will be conditional, and we will respect that." As the two aliens turned to leave, Mira's gaze followed them, mind whirling with questions and calculations. She had no idea how she was going to escape, but one thing was certain. They had underestimated her, and by the time they realized their mistake, she'd make sure it was too late. When the door slid shut behind them, Mira exhaled slowly, allowing herself a brief, bitter smile. They wanted to study human resilience. They were about to get a demonstration. Time became elusive aboard the alien vessel, a warped, silent rhythm that left Mira untethered from any semblance of the world she knew. The days and nights in her small, sterile cell were governed by a sequence of dimming and brightening lights, a poor imitation of a human day. She'd counted 3 such cycles since her confrontation with Aelrin and Commander Viren. It wasn't much, but Mira was already laying her groundwork. Each day a quiet routine unfolded. Aelrin and Viren visited her, sometimes together, sometimes individually. Aelrin was the more curious of the two, prone to asking her questions with a kind of fascinated detachment, as if dissecting a complex equation. Viren, on the other hand, rarely wasted words, and when he spoke, his voice held an undertone of restrained impatience, like he was waiting for her to misstep. Today, Aelrin arrived alone, his footsteps whispering against the cold floor. He carried a sleek device that flickered with strange symbols, and his gaze had that familiar, distant focus as he seated himself across from her. Mira sat on the metal bench they'd allowed her, crossing her arms. "Aelrin," she said, her voice dry, "back for more insights into the remarkable human mind?" Aelrin's lips curved, that half-smile she was learning to read as his version of amusement. "Your defiance remains enduring, Mira," he replied, eyes glinting. "I would have expected a greater inclination to cooperate by now." "Guess that makes me unpredictable," Mira shot back. She leaned in, adopting a deliberately casual tone. "But tell me something. Why the fixation on human resilience? Haven't you come across enough species in your travels? Or is Earth just that interesting?" For a moment, Aelrin merely studied her, the silver of his skin catching the light, giving him an almost otherworldly glow. Then he tilted his head, as if granting her an insight into his thoughts. "Humanity's adaptability is unique. Many species evolve physically, gaining strength, durability. Humans, however, evolve mentally. You persist, you adapt, even when faced with overwhelming odds." He paused, a flicker of something darker crossing his gaze. "It's a trait some among us find unsettling." "Unsettling?" Mira's eyebrow arched. "I'll take that as a compliment. Take it however you wish." His voice was as impassive as ever, yet there was a weight to his words. "But understand this. You are here because you were chosen, Mira. Your particular record drew our attention." Mira's stomach nodded, but she forced herself to keep her expression steady. "And what record is that?" Aelrin held her gaze, his tone almost gentle. "You survived an event, a trauma that would have broken most humans. We are curious to see how that strength might manifest, under different pressures." Mira felt her composure falter, just slightly, at the hint of her past he'd unearthed. She clenched her fists, steeling herself. They might have uncovered the details of her life, but she wasn't about to let them turn it into their twisted experiment. "You'll be disappointed," she said, her voice colder now. "I'm not some lab specimen you can poke and prod until you get the results you want." Elrin's smile widened fractionally, a flicker of admiration in his dark eyes. "We shall see." He leaned forward, his tone shifting, almost conspiratorial. "But Mira, have you considered that this knowledge, your resilience, could be a gift to your species?" She stared at him, her gaze hard. "My species doesn't need gifts from alien kidnappers, thank you very much." For a moment, Elrin's expression softened, something almost like regret touching his features. But before he could respond, the door slid open, and Commander Viren strode in, his gaze sharp as he assessed the scene. "Are you satisfied with this exchange, Doctor?" Viren's voice was laced with impatience. Elrin merely inclined his head, as if granting a concession. "For now." Viren's eyes flicked to Mira, his expression impassive but cold. "Remember, human," he said, his tone clipped, "your resilience may intrigue us, but it does not exempt you from the rules here. If you continue to resist, our methods will become less pleasant." Mira met his gaze unflinchingly, the heat of defiance rising in her chest. "Funny, Commander. I didn't think you were capable of anything pleasant." A muscle in Viren's jaw twitched, but he held his composure. "Enjoy your rest, Mira," he said coolly, turning on his heel and disappearing through the door, leaving her with Elrin. Silence settled between them. Elrin watched her, his gaze searching, as if attempting to decipher some hidden code. "Viren won't tolerate your defiance much longer," he said finally. "Your attitude amuses me, but it's a dangerous game you're playing." Mira let out a bitter laugh. "I didn't ask to play any game, Elrin. You and your commander dragged me into it." Elrin's gaze shifted, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps." He rose from his seat, pausing at the door. "Think on it, Mira. Cooperation may yet serve you well." As the door hissed shut behind him, Mira exhaled slowly, allowing the tension in her shoulders to release. Each encounter with Elrin and Viren left her with a new piece of information, a fragment of insight into the inner workings of her captors. Elrin was curious, a scientist bound by his intrigue, while Viren was cold, driven by authority and control. The differences between them felt significant enough to exploit. Later, when the lights dimmed to signal night, Mira lay awake, turning over her observations in her mind. Elrin's curiosity was something she could use, but Viren's steely discipline would make her moves difficult to maneuver without risk. She needed an ally, or at least someone who might question Viren's orders long enough to give her an opening. The next morning, as the lights brightened, she was surprised to find herself visited by neither Elrin nor Viren, but by another alien, a younger, wide-eyed figure with soft, opalescent skin and an uncertain gaze. He entered tentatively, carrying a tray with a strange assortment of food, cubes and spheres in colors that seemed more suited to a laboratory than a meal. Mira blinked, sitting up. "You're not my usual visitor." The alien's cheeks flushed a faint blue. A blush? "I am Kalir," he said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "Dr. Elrin has assigned me to bring you your sustenance." "Sustenance, huh?" Mira lifted a brow, eyeing the tray skeptically. "Looks like you raided an art supply store." Kalir's cheeks flushed a deeper shade, his gaze darting downward. "It's specially formulated to meet human dietary needs." "Oh, so you do know what humans eat." She arched a brow, lifting a neon green cube. "How thoughtful." He glanced at her uncertainly, shifting his weight. "Dr. Elrin is very thorough in his research." "So thorough that he decided I should be kidnapped?" Kalir hesitated, his gaze flickering with what looked like guilt. "I wasn't involved in the selection process," he stammered. "I am only here to observe." "Observe?" Mira set the cube down, crossing her arms. "And what exactly are you supposed to observe, Kalir? My response to being abducted? My defiance? He swallowed, looking more nervous by the second. We have never encountered a species like yours before. Dr. Elrin believes there is much to learn from you. Mira studied him, noting his discomfort. This was a foothold, perhaps. She softened her tone, letting a hint of vulnerability creep in. You know, Kalir, I didn't ask for any of this. I had a life, friends, family. And now I'm just some experiment for your doctor and his theories. His eyes widened, guilt shadowing his expression. I am sorry, he murmured. If I could, I would... You would what? She pressed gently. He hesitated, visibly torn, before finally sighing. I would make it so that you didn't have to suffer through this. But I am only a student of Dr. Elrin. My authority is limited. A spark of an idea formed in her mind. Maybe you don't have authority, Kalir, but you have influence. You understand humanity better than any of them do. Couldn't you help me, even just a little? Kalir looked stricken, glancing around the room as if Viren might appear at any moment. I could be reprimanded for interfering, he whispered. Or you could be part of something extraordinary, Mira said, her voice intense. Something more than just following orders. You'd be helping to bridge two species, to truly understand the strength of humanity. Isn't that what Elrin wants? He wavered, his eyes betraying a spark of hope. Perhaps there is a way, he whispered finally. But if we're caught, then we'll deal with that when it comes, Mira replied, offering a faint smile. Thank you, Kalir, for believing I'm more than just an experiment. Kalir nodded, swallowing nervously. We have little time, he murmured, already glancing toward the door. I will return soon. Be prepared. As he left, Mira exhaled a shaky breath. She was no longer alone in this fight. An alliance, however tentative, had begun. And as she lay back, her heart hammered with something she hadn't felt since her capture. The first glimmers of hope. The atmosphere aboard the alien ship shifted, thickening with an electrifying tension as Mira prepared for her next steps. Kalir's timid offer of assistance had awakened something within her. A flicker of hope, a spark of rebellion. She couldn't waste it. Every moment counted. When Kalir returned the following day, he was visibly anxious, the glow of his skin dimmer than before. He entered cautiously, glancing over his shoulder as if the walls themselves had ears. Mira, he whispered, dropping his voice to a hush. I've been thinking of a way to help you. It's risky, but if you are willing, I could guide you to the command center. Mira's heart raced. The command center? You mean to see the operations firsthand? Yes, but you must understand. The risks are significant. Commander Viren is often present, and if he discovers what I'm doing... His words trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Then we'll have to be smart about it, Mira replied, determination sharpening her voice. What's the plan? Kalir took a deep breath, his fingers fidgeting with the edges of his cloak. I can lead you through the maintenance tunnels. They are rarely monitored, and they'll bring us close to the control room. Once there, we can what? Mira interrupted, excitement bubbling through her. Access the ship's systems, send a distress signal, hijack the ship? Kalir flinched at her enthusiasm, his expression tinged with worry. Yes, but you must keep your voice down. The wall, they resonate with our thoughts. Right. Quiet, stealth, and surprise. Got it. She smirked, trying to lighten the mood. Let's do this. They set out under the cover of the next cycle's dimming lights, Kalir guiding her through the labyrinth of metallic corridors. The ship, with its sleek contours and bioluminescent panels, felt both alien and oddly beautiful, a blend of advanced technology and organic design. Mira followed Kalir's lead, her heart thumping in rhythm with the soft hum of the ship, both anxious and exhilarated. As they navigated through the narrow passages, Kalir shared snippets of his world, details about the crew and their mission, insights into alien technology that fascinated her. We've traveled across galaxies, but it's the connections that often intrigue me the most. Each species has its own quirks, its own histories. His voice trailed off as they turned a corner, halting abruptly as the faint sound of footsteps echoed ahead. "Hide," Mira whispered urgently, slipping into a shadowed alcove. Kalir followed, pressing close as they held their breath, the tension electric. 2 alien guards passed, their conversations laced with unfamiliar dialects, their presence a stark reminder of the danger that loomed over them. Mira exchanged a quick glance with Kalir, her heart pounding, and nodded when they were out of sight. "Now," she murmured. They moved again, creeping toward the control room. Kalir paused outside a heavy door, glancing around nervously, before swiping a device against the panel. The door slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with glowing screens and flickering consoles. Mira stepped inside, her breath catching at the sight. The heart of the ship pulsed with energy, a symphony of data and command at her fingertips. Kalir followed closely, his eyes wide with both fear and wonder. "This is it," he breathed. "But we need to act quickly." "Okay," Mira replied, quickly scanning the room. "Let's find a way to override their systems." She approached a terminal, fingers hovering above the console. "What do I need to do?" "Enter these coordinates," Kalir instructed, pointing to the screen. "But be cautious. Any error could alert them." As she typed, a sudden jolt rocked the room, sending a wave of alarm through her. Alarms blared, red lights flashing around them. "What's happening?" she shouted over the cacophony. "Someone must have noticed we're gone," Kalir exclaimed, panic etching his features. "We need to hurry." Mira's fingers flew across the keys as she entered commands, trying to stabilize the chaos. "We have to send a message to Earth. I need access to the communication systems." Kalir nodded, his hands trembling as he assisted her. "I can reroute the signals, if I can get to that terminal." He pointed to a far corner, beyond a row of pulsing consoles. Mira glanced back, her heart racing. "You can do it, Kalir. Just get there and stay low." With resolve hardening her heart, she turned back to the console. The screen flickered with encrypted data, and she cursed under her breath as she began deciphering it. Come on," she muttered, the tension mounting around them. Just as she hit a critical line of code, the door flew open, and Commander Viren strode in, flanked by guards. His piercing gaze locked onto Mira, fury radiating from him. "You! What are you doing here?" Panic surged through Mira as she turned, heart thudding loudly in her chest. "Kalir, go!" she shouted, pushing him toward the terminal. "I can't leave you," he protested, eyes wide with fear. "Just do it," she yelled, adrenaline flooding her veins. "You have to finish what we started." Viren advanced, his presence a looming threat. "Seize her," he commanded, his voice cold as steel. Mira's mind raced, thoughts colliding as she realized the gravity of her situation. She couldn't let them take her back, not now. "You think you can control me?" she spat, feeling a surge of defiance. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." With a sudden burst of energy, she lunged for the console, her fingers flying across the keys. Viren shouted, but the alarms drowned him out, the ship vibrating with chaos. "Kalir," she called, "get that signal out." As Viren and his guards advanced, Mira initiated the distress signal, knowing she might have only moments to act. "It's done," Kalir shouted, determination sparking in his voice. "Now we need to—" But before he could finish, Viren lunged, grabbing Mira's arm, yanking her back. "You will regret this insolence," he snarled. A surge of energy coursed through Mira as she swung around, surprising Viren with her strength. She broke free of his grip, launching herself toward Kalir. "We have to go." Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, the lights flickering as alarm screamed. Kalir's eyes widened in shock. "The signal! It's unstable!" "Then let's stabilize it!" Mira shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she punched in commands. The room rocked, and the console flared with bright energy. "Run!" Kalir urged, and together they sprinted toward the door, pushing past the guards who were now scrambling to regain control. Viren shouted after them, but Mira's focus was singular: escape. They darted down the corridor, the ship's alarms blaring like an ominous choir, the walls vibrating with urgency. Kalir led the way, glancing over his shoulder as Viren's furious shouts echoed behind them. "Mira, this way!" he urged, veering into a side passage that opened up to a wider deck. "What's happening?" she gasped, fear igniting her voice. "The ship is destabilizing. The signal has triggered a response," Kalir shouted, urgency lacing his tone. They pushed through the chaos, finally reaching a hatch that Kalir had indicated would lead to an escape pod bay. "We can make it," he insisted, pulling the door open. As they entered, they found themselves confronted by more guards, weapons raised, their expressions a mixture of shock and anger. Viren's voice resonated from behind, commanding and fierce. "Seize them!" Mira's heart raced, and in that instant, she felt the weight of her choices. She stepped forward, raising her hands. "Wait, I have something to say." The guards hesitated, looking to Viren for direction. "What could you possibly say to justify your actions?" he demanded, eyes blazing. "I have information, valuable information about Earth," Mira declared, desperation fueling her words. "Help me escape, and I can provide insights that will benefit your kind." A tense silence fell, every eye locked onto her as the room pulsed with tension. Kalir's expression shifted, a flicker of hope in his gaze. Viren's expression hardened, but he seemed torn, weighing her words carefully. "What information could you possibly have that would interest us?" "Strategies, defenses, ways to strengthen our ties," she said quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. "You don't have to see me as an enemy. I can help you understand humans better, but you have to let me go." For a moment the world held its breath. Kalir edged closer, looking hopeful. Finally Viren sighed, tension rippling through his frame. "This is a gamble, Mira. You claim to possess knowledge of value, yet we know nothing of your intentions." Mira's heart raced, sensing the moment's gravity. "All I want is to ensure my survival, and to help you understand us. Isn't that a better path than conflict?" Viren's eyes narrowed, deliberation etched on his features. "Very well. But know this: betray us, and you will regret it. The consequences will be severe." With a nod, Viren motioned for the guards to lower their weapons. "Let them go," he commanded. As the tension eased, Kalir looked at Mira, eyes wide with disbelief. "You did it," he whispered, a spark of excitement igniting between them. "Not yet," Mira replied, her mind racing. "We still need to get off this ship." The escape pod bay loomed before them, and Mira's heart thudded with anticipation. They had done the impossible. Now they just had to survive. As they stepped toward the pod, Mira turned back to Viren, who remained rooted in place, the weight of their choices hanging in the air. "Thank you," she said sincerely, her voice steady. "Do not waste this chance," Viren replied, his tone hard but tinged with something unspoken. With that, Kalir and Mira slipped into the escape pod, adrenaline surging as the hatch sealed behind them. The controls lit up, and Mira's fingers danced across the buttons, programming their coordinates. "Ready?" Kalir asked, his voice trembling with excitement and fear. "Ready," Mira confirmed, her heart racing as she initiated the launch sequence. As the pod blasted away from the ship, they felt the force of their escape, the distant shrieks of alarms fading into the void. Mira glanced back at the ship, a mixture of relief and uncertainty washing over her. They had made it, but the path ahead was still fraught with challenges. "We did it," Kalir breathed, awe coloring his voice as he looked at Mira, gratitude etched on his face. "We did," she echoed, a smile breaking across her lips. But as the stars stretched out before them, an unsettling thought flickered through her mind. They had escaped, but they were now stepping into the unknown, a world of uncharted dangers and newfound possibilities. Mira took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. This was just the beginning, and she was ready to confront the mysteries of the universe. Her fiery spirit ignited with the promise of adventure, her resolve unyielding as the stars beckoned them forward into the night.